just to kind of clarify what it is we did ascertain, if you will. And I'll do it by asking a simple question with you saying yes or no. We found that your role here was to facilitate the process and basically put various recommendations together and send it to the appropriate agency or expertise or individuals. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and to do more of the technical, the redrafting.
Correct.
Part based on those comments, yes.
Thank you. Right. In at least 2 instances, you said that you were at the meeting at the Hyatt. You had found out about the contract with relatively short notice, and I'm not sure if you said it was an hour or so. You got to see the document before you attended the meeting, and then on another instance, relevant to your review of the escrow agreement, again you stated you saw that roughly, either you saw it 30 minutes before it was, or you had 30 minutes to review it. I recall you using 30 minutes as, you basically had limited time to review it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it would be fair to say I had limited time to review the escrow, guarantee, pledge agreements.
Thank you. And I think you may have stated this, that this requires a more detailed analysis, a legal analysis, which, again, going back to everything you've said, shows didn't really happen. There doesn't appear to be a detailed legal analysis of this contract, at least from your perspective. Your involvement, rather. Ms. Patel.
Yes. I had stated that some of the questions being asked of me today would require more legal analysis. I don't know that it would be fair to say the entire agreement needed more analysis, one way or the other, whether it did or didn't. I don't know if that's a fair statement. But in regards to my testimony here today, some of the questions asked of me would require more legal analysis on my part to answer accurately.
Thank you. That is all. If there's no objection from the members, I will dismiss Ms. Patel. Thank you. Ms. Patel, the committee may or may not ask you to return to answer any further questions. I just ask that before you are dismissed, you provide our attorney, our sergeant-at-arms rather, the gentleman behind you dressed in red, with your contact number, and we will give you reasonable notice if you are going to be asked to return. With that, thank you.
Thank you.
And you're dismissed. Sarge, can you please call in Mr. Gil Birmbrich. Have a nice day, Ms. Patel. Members, before we entertain Mr. Birmbrich, it's safe to say we're not going to meet our 1 o'clock deadline, so maybe we'll ask our LAs to push back our 1 p.m. Hearing to depends on what time we're finished with Mr. Birmbrich. Maybe we'll just continue, and when we finish, we'll call it from there. No, thank you, Mr. Birmbrich. Good afternoon, sir. You still remember the button on your mic, right?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So please, just before I put you under oath, can you make sure that if you have a cell phone, can you make sure it's turned off? And that goes for your legal counsel as well. Thank you. Would you kindly raise your right hand? Sir, do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth?
I swear, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you kindly state your name, title, or position, and the agency you represent?
My full name is Gilbert J. Birmbrich. I work at the Office of the Attorney General, and I work as the Chief of the Civil Division.
Thank you, Mr. Birmbrich. Would your counsel please identify himself as well?
Hello. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is James Carney, Assistant Attorney General.
Thank you. Mr. Birmbrich, recognize his legal counsel.
Chairman, to start, we would like to object to the issuance of subpoenas by this committee. It is our understanding that this committee lacks authority under Commonwealth law to issue subpoenas.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. So noted. We will proceed. Mr. Birmbrich, what is your role? I know you said you were the chief of the civil division, but maybe explain to us what is your role as the chief of the civil division at the Attorney General's office?
The Office of the Attorney General at present has two divisions. One division is the criminal division, where everyone there is more
Yours, more specifically the civil.
Yes. The division I in charge of is the civil division. We handle basically everything other than criminal law.
Thank you. And everything other than criminal law means, in this case, and we'll go straight into it, a contract, any contract that with the CNMI government or its agencies and a vendor would fall under your jurisdiction. Is that a fair statement?
Almost every contract entered into, other than with some agencies at certain times, are eventually will be reviewed at the very minimum by the Office of the Attorney General. I just say, like the other agencies, CUC has its own procurement process, but the Office of the Attorney General actually also reviews those too, even when they're not under an emergency declaration.
Thank you. Do the legal counsels for CUC fall under the Attorney General's office?
Currently, the designated legal counsel for the CUC is an Assistant Attorney General. That would be Rebecca Wrightson.
And just so we understand, at the period of time relative to the negotiation of this contract, was the CUC's legal counsel a member of the Attorney General's office, and who would that individual be?
There was some overlap, to my recollection. When the proposed power purchase agreement was forwarded to us by the other party, Deborah Fisher, I believe, was still the counsel. But we had, at the same time, we had designated Tiberius Mokano to be CUC's counsel, because we know CUC is a very complicated area. They deal with many important complicated issues of law. So he was designated I believe, at the end of May, and he was supposed to be trained up, and was trained up actually by Deborah Fisher for a month. And then Deborah Fisher stopped being CUC's counsel at the, I believe it was end of June. And then at that point it was Tiberius Mokanu was the designated CUC, or Attorney General designated to CUC. But we also had another Assistant Attorney General, Rebecca Wrightson, who also assisted Tiberius there, and she did some other duties for the Office of the Attorney General.
Thank you. And you clarified that for the purposes of procurement regulations, of CUC's procurement regs, that determination of whether this contract or any contract fell within procurement regs, CUC's procurement regs, that was your office's responsibility, correct?
The parts of like review is, yes, it was a part of the responsibilities of the Office of the Attorney General. It gets a little more complicated because CUC, kind of like what Herman Sablon is to the regular procurement process, they have their own procurement officer.
We understand that.
Yeah.
But if a CUC contract warranted sole source rather than the other forms of competitive bidding, one would look to CUC's procurement regulations to make that determination. Yes?
In the ordinary course, yes.
Is this ordinary?
It's CUC is currently operating under an emergency declaration, which to the position of the administration, it gives the governor the ability to suspend procurement regs as needed.
During the course of the negotiations, was CUC under emergency declaration?
Yes. I first entered into the emergency declaration on, I believe it was May 15th, and it's been continuously updated since, or renewed every 30 days since.
Okay, thank you. And what you're saying is because under the emergency declaration, CUC or a sole source contract like this would not fall under the CUC's procurement regs. Is that correct?
It is our, like I said, position that kind of what I said earlier. There are many contracts, I believe, at CUC that run through the normal CUC procurement process, but the governor could, under his powers, suspend that and sign on behalf of CUC.
Okay, thank you.
Under his powers, under the emergency declaration.
Thank you for clarifying that. Was that the emergency powers, which would be based on the emergency declaration, was that the justification, if you will, that of the governor's authority to enter into a sole source contract with Saipan Development?
It is my recollection that that was the authority that gave him the ability to sign on behalf of CUC on that contract.
Thank you. Now, we all know, it's common knowledge, it's been in the, what do you call this, in the news, what was entailed in the emergency declaration. And I think, I don't have it in front of me, but my understanding is that it was to facilitate the renewable energy projects. That's kind of what was in there. So in this case, though, Mr. Birmbrich, nothing in the emergency declaration that I saw justified the need for a conventional 50 megawatt diesel engine power plant. So again, let me ask, what was that? What basis in the emergency declaration can be used to justify a sole source contract for a 50 megawatt diesel plant?
I believe the thinking at the time, I still believe that is the position of the administration today, is that an emergency declaration gives the power to the governor to remediate whatever impending problems that CUC has. It doesn't necessarily have to be declared or like found in the findings of fact. I also know that I too did not review the emergency declaration before this hearing. I wish I would have. But I believe there was a catch-all provision towards the bottom where the governor reserves power to take other actions necessary to cure whatever problems CUC was facing at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Birmbrich. Now, looking at this emergency power again, what my understanding of this authority granted to the governor is in cases of emergency that the governor may elect to, the governor's given the powers to not to follow normal procedures which are intended to protect our agencies and our commonwealth, to bypass those, if you will, to address an emergency. Can you tell us, by signing this contract, what emergency did he address?
I don't believe entering into the power plant agreement was necessarily to remediate one of the stated crises, at least directly full on, that were mentioned in the emergency declaration. I believe that once...
Can you speak louder, sir?
Sorry. I believe it's the position of administration that when it was put under emergency declaration, the governor had that power, and that it's not necessarily directly tied to ameliorating or remediating a specific crisis. That it's broad. The powers are broad under emergency declaration.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Birmbrich. The emergency declaration justified the need to address the emergency, and so the specific action that was taken was to sign a sole source contract. Now, under normal circumstances, procurement regulations would have warranted that we bid it out and get competitive bids so that we can look at it, we can have contractors or vendors compete for this service. But in this case, all of that was bypassed to address a concern. Do you know what that concern is?
Well, we do know that the power plant does not have that much longer to go on. I believe that is well known. And for power, electricity, and this is actually also mentioned in the EO, if we don't have a reliable power, then everything on island gets affected. Commerce, the hospital, and that directly leads to the health and welfare of the people of the CNMI.
And if what you're saying is correct, then the emergency declaration would state what you just stated, right?
I believe that, once again, kind of like what I said before, it's rather expansive, and we do not believe that it has to be directly stated. I think, in effect, it can be implied.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask you a point-blank question. Here's one of my problems with the way the emergency power was used. Normally you would use it to address emergency issues with short-term solutions, something just to get us, make sure we kind of clear this hurdle in front of us, this problem, if you will. And so we would take measures that are temporary in nature, designed to, like you said, ameliorate or mitigate the effects of the emergency. Is entering into a 25-year contract for 25 years in line or consistent with the use of an emergency power?
At the time we entered into the agreements, the ability, we believe that the EO, even as written, gave us the power to enter into that agreement.
Okay, just a few more before I turn it over to the others. Whose role in the AG, or rather, who in the AG's office reviewed the contract for form and capacity?
We had a number of attorneys who looked at that contract and put on some input. I know I was one of the attorneys, Marina Patel, who you had just testifying in here, Tiberius Mokanu. There was also another, I believe, Mike Stanker. And to the best of my recollection, I believe that was it from our office.
So you had a number of attorneys looking at the agreement, perhaps looking at different parts of the agreement, and your combined recommendations or position would constitute the legal review of this contract for form and capacity. Is that a fair statement?
I believe the fact that we looked at the Office of the Attorney General and its various Assistant Attorney Generals, and we looked at that would constitute the review necessary for review, and for review by the Attorney General for form and legal capacity. Yes, sir.
Do you feel you had you and your staff had adequate time to review the contract for form and capacity?
I believe we had adequate time to have reviewed it. We were like in the middle of negotiating it as well. So, to answer your question, I believe yes.
Mr. Birmbrich, we have numerous correspondence from everybody from CUC to your own staff saying that this project is on a fast track, that I think there were negotiations going on simultaneously while you and your staff were trying to review the documents or the agreement and trying to put it all together. And that's why I asked that question. Did you have adequate time? And your answer is yes. Ultimately, we understand the Attorney General is responsible. When he signs that document, that contract, he is certifying that it does have legal form and we do have and capacity. But I just wanted to get from you, since you seem to be the highest ranking Attorney General that we've interviewed so far. And Mr. Ed Buckingham is not here to answer questions. There appears to be a lot of legal problems with this contract. A lot. Not just in terms of form, mostly with capacity. We are being obligated to provide, produce, to guarantee things that one doesn't normally see in regular power purchase agreements. It does seem to be overly generous to one side, and that is not our side. So we have to determine whether in fact this contract was reviewed properly, adequately, and sufficiently to ensure that safeguards are in place. Can I ask you, what did the Attorney General's office do to ensure that safeguards were in place to protect not only CUC but our ratepayers?
Well, I know that, like I mentioned before, it was reviewed by several attorneys. We'd also gotten input from other people. We did get some input from CUC, either directly from like the CUC management or through, or indirectly through Mr. Mokanu, who's their CUC counsel. We had people like me who went through the agreements and looked at them. I know, like I said, we had Reena Patel and Mike Stanker also contributed, and we would raise our concerns where we thought there were, where we thought that things definitely could seek improvement, and we would then air those concerns to the appropriate people, who in this case was like the Attorney General, who's the lead. At that point, it comes a point for people like us and the Office of Attorney General where you leave it to the policymakers. You give your best legal advice, and I believe we did that. We told them the risks, the benefits, the consequences for these clauses. I believe we did that competently, and we did it diligently. And then we left it up to the decision makers, and they made their decision.
Thank you, and we understand that. And we are aware of some of the comments that were made by your staff and some of the Attorney Generals that provided their input. But because, and eventually a policy decision was made to enter into this contract, which was not necessarily your decision to make. the ultimate question Mr. Birmbrich would have to be asked is, were the concerns that you raised, you and your staff, were they addressed prior to the execution of this contract?
It is my recollection and belief that that we put the issues out there where we had the concern. I know we had issued issue statements, and they were looked at by our side, discussed, and then we looked at and then discussed it and negotiated those points with the other side. Did we always get what we wanted? Well, if we all got what we wanted, then we probably would have gotten a free power plant. But that's not the case. So once again, just to answer your question, I believe we presented all the issues to the decision makers, and the decision makers then made a decision based on all the information that was relevant at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Birmbrich. I'll yield now for other members. Representative De La Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Birmbrich, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Birmbrich, when did you become aware of this, I guess, project that was unraveling and eventually becoming an agreement between the Sinamay government and Saipan Development? When did you become aware of this discussions and talks? And how did you find out about it?
They first appeared, they being the main actors. Don Kurtz is the president of Keystone Shipping, and Ken Mahmood, who's his company is Commodore Incorporated. I first became aware of them in mid-December of last year, 2011. And apparently they had made some contact with the governor's office, and the governor's office referred them to Attorney General Buckingham, and then that's how I became aware of them.
You said the governor's office referred these individuals to the Attorney General's office. Do you know whether they were ever referred to CUC itself?
I do not believe, it is my recollection that CUC actually did not become involved with these individuals until, I believe, June of this year, 2012.
Okay. So they were referred to the AG's office, and then that's when you became pretty much aware of what was happening. Tell me something, Mr. Birmbrich. Does the Attorney General's office do any type of background checks with regards to entities that are willing and coming in to offer services or products, in this case building a diesel power plant? Does the AG's office do any sort of background checks to the company, the individuals involved in the company?
In general, we don't have a formal sort of background check. I know we did not do a formal background check in this case regarding these two individuals. I guess you could say we did an informal. I know I personally just did like an internet search on Keystone Shipping, and so I didn't do a search actually on the other individual, Ken Mahmood, but when I looked Don Kurtz.
Can you clarify that? Did you say you did an informal search on Mr. Ken Mahmood?
No, I did not. And but I mean, like, an informal search is basically just would be like an internet search. I did not do one for Mr. Mahmood, and to my knowledge, nobody in our office did either.
Did you do one for Mr.
Mahmood?
Mr. Don Kurtz?
We did the search for Keystone Shipping, for which he was the president, and that's, well, they certainly seemed like they were a legitimate company. I believe they are like $1 billion company.
So they're a $1 billion company, and they're offering to build a power plant, but they're a shipping company, right?
Well, when they first came on island, they were saying that they were interested in building a shipyard. Anything regarding a power plant was supposed to be related to that shipyard.
And what became of this shipyard? Was this shipyard discussed in length? We know that there's nothing in the PPA that relates to a shipyard being built. So what, on the outset of things, when things were being discussed, was the shipyard the main gist of the talks between the AG, or was it just an exclusive power plant that this company was supposed to be building?
When we first started talking with them, and just to be clear, it's not we were talking with them constantly. It was just a contact every once in a while. The shipyard project was a priority, and it immediately became apparent that if they wanted to have like a shipyard, you would have to do something about the power plant, because the power plant is basically in the way. So it kind of turned into, well, obviously the CNMI needs power, and you would have to build this power plant first to get the shipyard. But along the way, it did become somewhat delinked.
May I interject? Not relevant to questions being asked, but we have people out there waiting for this 1 o'clock hearing. I would estimate we'll be done probably closer to 2, maybe an hour lunch after that. May I ask for the indulgence of the members to release, or rather to ask the witnesses outside to return at maybe 3 o'clock so we can resume?
No objection.
So they don't have to be waiting out there?
No objection, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. This time, Sarge, would you please go outside and ask the witnesses to please return at 3 o'clock for their hearing? Sorry, Representative.
No, you're not going anywhere, Mr. Birmbrich.
We're not done with you yet, Mr. Birmbrich.
We like you here.
Please proceed, Representative De La Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. And so, I guess what I'm getting here is that there was this shipyard facility. And we've heard that before, where in order for it to materialize, we had to move something. And this something was this power plant. But we can't move a power plant unless we have another power plant that's ready to go, ready to be fired up, so that it can take the load. But then somewhere down the line you said the two issues became delinked. In other words, it was separated, so now we're only looking at this power plant, power purchase agreement. Mr. Birmbrich, you stated earlier that under the emergency declaration, the governor is authorized to also implement, based on his authority, to go into a contract with a diesel power plant, even though it is not stated in the emergency declaration. And one of the reasons you gave, as I recall it, was that it may be an impending problem. It may also be because of the life of the power plant engines. Is that correct so far?
Yes, I believe I did say that.
Okay. And where did you hear about this life of engines being short? Before you answer that, you know, we had met on numerous occasions, not here, not just here, but over at the Senate with the acting executive director, and he has stated that these engines are good for the next 7 to 10 years, provided that regular maintenance is done. So if you're going to answer that Mr. Fletcher informed you about the lifespan of the engines, then I guess we can probably say that Mr. Fletcher was lying to us. But then again, let us wait for your, please.
I believe when I am talking about the time span, how I characterize the time span, that was coming from Mr. Fletcher at his time. I recalled it, but I'm not in any way saying that Mr. Fletcher is, incorrect or misstated. I thought it was like the only difference I had, I believe, it was from 5 to 10 years instead of 7. But I will defer to Mr. Fletcher as he's the professional, and I am an attorney and not a power plant person.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Birmbrich. Earlier, you also stated that you did an informal search on these individuals, namely Mr. Don Kurtz. But I'm guessing that's just something that, hey, we want to know more about these individuals. Why didn't you do an informal search for Mr. Kenneth Mahmood?
I don't want to go too much into speculation here, but I kind of recall that we didn't consider Mr. Mahmood to be the main player in this. We thought the man of substance in this whole transaction was Mr. Kurtz.
So, can you inform the committee what was Mr. Mahmood's role then during these discussions? And who was he representing?
He presented his business card. He said it was Commodore Incorporated, which is his own personal company. I know that he is the brother of, I believe, David Mahmood, who is the chief operating officer, I believe, or president or some executive of Allegiant Capital, which is a major investment company based, I believe, in Dallas, Texas. And I also know that he seemed to have or that he'd been here before, and he seemed to have some like contacts, either business contacts or he knew people in the political community.
Okay. Mr. Birmbrich, let me point your attention to July 4th of this year, 2012. July 4th, that was Liberation Day. Did you get to watch the parade?
I did not watch the parade this year.
Okay. We have a minute of a meeting that took place over at the Hyatt. Were you present at that meeting?
I believe I was present at that meeting.
Okay. Who else was present at that meeting, Mr. Birmbrich?
To the best of my recollection, I believe Alan Fletcher was present. I don't believe Mr. Stump was present. And I believe the Attorney General was present. That's the one I can recall.
Did you recall Mr. Don Kurtz, Mr. Ken Mahmood was also present?
Yes.
Okay. During this particular meeting at the Hyatt, and you were discussing a fuel tank and a bulk purchase of fuel, and so I believe this is about the time when some wheeling and dealings were supposed to be going on. Am I correct?
I believe we were negotiating.
A tit for a tat,
Well,
somewhat.
we were trying to negotiate a power plant agreement.
Right, right. And through your recollection, did you ever hear the Attorney General asking Mr. Fletcher, how much were we spending per month on fuel? Did you recollect? And then Mr. Fletcher answered about $6 million.
I don't really recollect that. I'm pretty sure that at some point we had asked, or the Attorney General had asked, how much we were spending on fuel. $6 million a month seems like a lot. I'm not saying it's completely out of the realm. If he said it,
Yeah, I'm just asking.
I just can't recall him
Okay.
saying it.
Yeah, yeah. Did you also recall whether the former Attorney General was asking if this deal can be restructured so that it will include a new fuel storage and also include $6 million for the Commonwealth to buy 1 month of fuel, and to keep the $6 million separate so we could always be a month ahead, making us a customer, not a debtor / beggar. And then Mr. Don Kurtz replied, this made it a lot harder to sell the deal. Did you recall Mr. Kurtz saying that?
That does sound familiar.
Okay. Did you also recall Mr. Ken Mahmood saying that even if the cost to the customer remained the same, this was still a good deal. It was still a good project for the Commonwealth because it means getting a new power plant. It doesn't matter whether, the cost is even to what we have now. We're getting a new power plant, so Saipan is getting a good deal. Did you recall this?
I recall Mr. Mahmood saying that, but I also recall at the time that we rejected that line of thinking. At the time we were going for a guaranteed 10% reduction in the cost of consumers.
And did we ever get that guarantee, Mr. Birmbrich?
No.
What did we get? What guarantee with regards to fuel cost reduction did we get? What are we getting? What instead?
It's my understanding of the contract that we did not get the guaranteed 10% reduction for consumers. We were able to structure it into there where CUC could get or make sure they get the most fuel efficient engines and other technologies where they could create the efficiencies where we hope to achieve, and that's what it was converted into, the goal, not necessarily the guarantee of savings for the consumers based on this power plant that we built based on this agreement.
Mr. Birmbrich, let me bring your attention to the actual signed contract dated August 3rd.
Sorry, may I interject? To give the other chance members...
this will be my last.
So that we can come back to you.
Yes,
but
yes.
just so. Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Birmbrich, let me bring your attention to Article 2.16, page 11, item A of the contract, and let me read it out. So, the parties intend that the plan will produce electricity with a 10% or greater efficiency than currently obtained by CUC. I'm guessing that this is the existing plant that we have right now.
So that 10% standard is supposed to be based on the existing plant.
Okay. And that the plant equipment, including the diesel engines, will be jointly selected by the parties in an effort I just wanted to hear from you. So what then happens if this new power plant does not generate at 10% cost reduction? What will happen? Do we find them? Can we find them?
I believe under the wording of that agreement is like, no.
So really, it's que sera. You don't give us 10% cost reduction, no one's hurt. But, it doesn't matter because it's like Mr. Mahmood said, it's a new plant. So, you read this prior to the signing by Mr. Buckingham and Governor Fitzgerald. Did you not?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Birmbrich. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Rep. Sablan. Are you prepared? Rep. Tip. Any other members? Okay. I guess I'll ask a few then. again, I go back to the Attorney General's role here in reviewing this contract. Mr. Birmbrich, is part of your role in reviewing this contract, or rather, let me restate that, the issue of rate review or any provision in the contract having to do with the rates, is that something you're responsible for?
Are you citing to a specific part of the contract, or?
Yeah, I guess the question Representative De La Cruz asked, Article 2, Section 2.16 refers to the matter of the rates and the rate reduction, the 10%. Is that something that CUC is responsible for determining, or is it also part of your responsibility?
I don't believe our office would have any responsibility in enforcing that.
It's not your responsibility. What about another provision of the contract, Article 7, Section 7.2I and 7.3B and 7.7, which states if CUC's financial condition undergoes an adverse change, all money due under this agreement will be due and payable with interest. Is that something the Attorney General's office would be concerned with as a provision of the contract? Or is that something that somebody else's responsibility, CUC maybe?
Well, I'm sure if you're asking whether, like when we were negotiating, we were concerned about that provision, I'm sure that we noted it, and although I can't directly off the top of my head say that we talked about it, I would have to look perhaps in my notes or at the issue sheet that I believe you have copies of right now already. If you're talking about like in the future, then yes, the Office of the Attorney General would be concerned about CUC's financial condition, because we know that would have that provision in there. But that, of course, that should be CUC is the first instance that they would monitor that.